Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of this sort of webinar focusing on the Southern Texas drought and weather conditions and outlook. My name is Joel Lisenby. I'm with NIDIS, and I'm based in Colorado. I'm happy to welcome both Victor Murphy and John Nielsen-Gammon to present at this webinar. As we go, if you have questions that you would like to ask as we go, I'd ask you to type those questions into the question box in the GoToWebinar, and I will be sorting through those as the presenters present their things. And at the end, I will be orchestrating some of those questions. Either I'll ask them from the question box directly, or if you're still online, I can ask you to ask your question, to unmute yourself and ask your question. So without further ado, I hope that this works. I'll introduce our first presenter, who is Victor Murphy. Victor is the Climate Services Program Manager at the National Weather Service Southern Region, which includes the state of Texas. And he routinely participates in drought monitoring and the issuance of climate products from various National Weather Service weather forecast offices across Texas. And so now I will try to pass the presenter view back to Victor. Oh, I hope I can get this right. And the answer is yes to that. All right, Victor, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Yeah, hi, as Joel mentioned, my name is Victor Murphy. I'm the Climate Service Program Manager for the National Weather Service Southern Region Headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. I routinely work with Dr. Nielsen-Gammon, who is our state climatologist. Every week or so, we have conference calls and webinars, which John spearheads. We're blessed to have him as our state climatologist. And we go over the drought webinars, the drought situation as far as the U.S. drought monitor goes. And we work with the NIDIS folks, with Joel, to put together this webinar. We're going to do it every 2 weeks. So my outlook, I've sort of got the presentation here. Let's see here. So I got the presentation here pretty much going to outline a few quick things. Number one, how do we get here to where we're at? What are the major impacts, and what is the short-term outlook for the next 1 or 2 weeks, and what is the longer-term outlook for the next 3 to 6 weeks, pretty much through the end of May and early June. We're going to be doing these webinars every 2 weeks, which I think is great. I appreciate Joel putting it together and John for participating also. So I personally, at least on my presentation, I didn't really go out too much further or too far in time. Summertime sort of a dart throw anyway as far as precip goes, but I think the month of May will be critical for us to get out of this drought. So here we go. So basically the drought conditions, if you will, started in general across the state of Texas on basically August, September. We had the sort of under the radar, I think John may have mentioned at the time during one of our drought webinars, but lo and behold, for the state of Texas as a whole, August, September was the hottest on record for the state. You can see where the average temperature was 83.6, which is about 4.5 degrees warmer than normal. That's for the 2-month period, August, September. So very hot. There was a record warm temp and a tremendous flash drought that occurred from Louisiana eastward, and quite honestly, it may have actually extended westward into parts of Texas. As far as precip goes for the entire state of Texas for August, September, we were 73% of normal, which was the 5th driest in the last 25 years. So basically a bottom 20% dry period for the state as a whole, which is pretty significant. But the big X factor is the temperatures. And I'm hoping that John can maybe touch upon that a little bit in his presentation. If not, we can do it next week or two in our next presentation perhaps. But these temperatures that are accompanying these dry conditions, or these abnormally dry conditions, or the droughts, if you will, are really the big X factor. And that's what's separating, I think, these dry periods, maybe perhaps say from our parents or grandparents' droughts back in the 1950s. Temperatures are much warmer now than they were back then. And you can see that here. You see the temperatures here, and at least for August, September in the 1950s, just so the drought record for Texas, you can see how it pales in comparison to where we are right now. Okay, so with that as a backstop, the dry August, the hot and dry August, September, drought started rearing its ugly head in Texas in the October time period. Here in the top left, you can see October 8th, what the drought monitor looked like. Had 30% of Texas was in severe drought or worse, which is the dark brown areas and the reds. And you can see it was pretty uniform, pretty widespread across the entire state. South Texas was drought-free, which is not too surprising because September is our wettest time period. And so the September precip came through. And so they were okay, at least in October. In Southeast Texas, I believe, has some of those tropical storm or tropical cyclone rain bombs that kept them near normal. But you see as we move into December, not a whole lot of change. There was some improvement here in North Texas. And then the above normal rainfall for North Texas just continued right on into the 2020. So you can see here by February 18th of 2020, how North Texas and Northeast Texas pretty much drought free. It actually is drought free, but not the case of South Texas. And this is when the drought started really sort of focusing on this I-10 corridor southward, which is the area that we're going to be focusing on today. You can see by early February, all of the severe or greater drought, by and large, was south of I-10. Okay, so what about between February and March and April, where we are right now? The improvement continued from north to south across the state, and you can see on the left there is March 17 drought monitor. On the right is the most recent one from April 14th. The new one comes out tomorrow. But you can see just a continued improvement as pretty much all of Texas north of I-10 saw above normal rainfall for the winter into the spring, but unfortunately, South Texas did not get the memo, and you can see that the drought continues across the southern third of the state, or South Texas. Although there has been some improvement, there has been a few scattered heavy rain events or widely scattered heavy rain events in the past month or so. So you can see in general from March to April, the amount of extreme drought, which is the red, that's D3. You can see how it has decreased some, especially here across the counties just east of San Antonio and extending southwestward down towards the Rio Grande. But there are still about 3 or 4 hot spots of drought, which I'll touch upon here in a little bit, and they're all happen to be in South Texas. So this map here shows the percent of normal rainfall from October 1st to present, and then the bottom right one is from January 1st to present. And in general, you can see 4 hot spots that have really sort of popped up as far as drought goes. One here is in southern Maverick County and so the adjacent counties. The other one here, which is pretty small in size, was probably the most significant as far as intensity goes, is here along Zapata County and Starr County. Cameron County is also in the mix, as is the Victoria, Bay City, Palacios area here in the middle to upper coast. So rainfall from year to date to now, you can see these 4 hot spots are still in play. Not much change out here in the western two, but the one in Cameron County or in the lower Rio Grande Valley has sort of expanded westward slightly into I believe it's Hidalgo County, and you can see the one there in along the middle coast has definitely expanded also. So if we go back and look at the last 60 days, once again, percent of normal rainfall, you can see all kinds of heavy rainfall here from Del Rio area up northeastward into northeast Texas. And you can see some scattered heavy rain events here, really sort of hit or miss. If you're underneath one of these things, one of these rain bombs, if you will, unfortunately, these things are associated, a lot of them with hail and severe weather. But, some areas have got 200, 300% of normal rainfall in the last 60 days. Parts, I think, Duval County here. and southeast Webb, but surrounding that is still the same 4 hotspots, if you will. The one in southern Maverick is continuing to get worse. One in Zapata and Starr County about the same. The Hidalgo, Cameron County one is getting a little bit worse as far as intensification goes. And the big hotspot right now is really the middle coast here, or the upper coast, say perhaps from northern Cleburne County up to the Corpus Christi area to about Victoria and Jackson County, and I believe Matagorda County. You can see the dark browns there are 25 to 50% normal precip or normal rainfall over the past 60 days. The red areas are actually only 10 to 25%. So let's look at a few areas. There are a couple of hotspots. Start off in the lower Rio Grande Valley, Brownsville. Since January 1st, they've had just over 1 inch of rain, about 23% of normal. The brown line here is normal, and they should have about 4.5 inches of rainfall, I believe, from January 1st through April 21st. In reality, they've only had 109. That's the green line. And the lowest during that time period was like 1901. You can see where it ranks. And the most recent lowest one was 2009. So basically, we got about 140 years of data for Brownsville. This is the 9th driest start of the year, on record. And it's also the driest since 2009. So about a 1 to 10 year, perhaps 1 to 15 year drought. Once again, the big kicker is temperatures. So you have a question mark there. Well, glad you asked, because the temperatures for this time period happen to be the second warmest year to date. So once again, maybe a 1 in 10 year, 1 in 15 year drought, but when you factor in the heat and the warm temperatures and the stress that puts on surface water and crops and animals, etc., I think that really sort of ratchets up the drought severity by an amount that's a little bit difficult to quantify, to be honest with you, but we know it's there. Corpus Christi, they've had 2.33 inches since January 1st, about 35% of normal. Not quite as bad as Brownsville. It's their lowest year to date since 2013. That's the purple line here. The green line is what they've had so far this year. You see that a nice little rain event here in early April, which spiked them up a little bit. The driest such period was actually in 2006 here in red. And same thing there, about a 1 in 10 year drought there also. Once again, what about the temperatures? Well, it's the 6th hottest year to date behind 2006. So 2006, I don't remember that per se, but between being the driest on record and also one of the hottest on record, that had to have been a very serious short-term drought back then. Of course, that's once again, about 15 years ago. Victoria, as you move up the coast, rainfall amounts increase. They've had it exactly 7 inches since November 1st. So the drought up there is actually is a little bit longer term than further south. They missed out on the heavier rainfall September, October, etc. But anyway, so it looks from November 1st through now, they've had 47% of normal rain over a 6-month period, which is a long period of time to only have less than half of normal rainfall. Driest since 2013 and 2014, which is the purple line here. And also the driest such period was actually back 1970 through 71 down here in red. So once again, about a 1 in 10 year drought roughly. And once again, temperatures, the 5th hottest such period. So the warm temperatures, whatever you want to attribute it to, the warm temperatures have definitely exacerbated the ongoing drought. So let's sort of go forward here and see where we're headed. So the best way to see, as far as breaking drought or getting out of drought is, hey, what's the weather supposed to be short term, or what is the climate, rather, what is the climatological average rainfall over a certain period of time? Well, so for each side here, Victoria, this is really key. May happens to be the wettest month of the year for Victoria. You can see 5.2 inches here. You can see the big increase from the December through April dry season or drier period. You can see rainfall amounts increased almost double from April into May. So if Victoria, needless to say, if Victoria gets near normal rainfall for the month of May, doesn't need to be above normal per se, but just near normal rainfall with 5+ inches of rainfall, that should lead to some short-term improvement. And you can see Victoria in general stays pretty wet from May into October. little bit different stories. We move down the coast. I got Corpus Christi on the left, Brownsville on the right. You can see there is a little bit of an increase both in Corpus and Brownsville as you go from April to May. Both of them have a very pronounced dry season from November into April. So rainfall does start ticking up in May. But the amount of increase in rainfall in May is less than what it is further up the coast of Victoria, a little bit less of an increase. And September is far and away the wettest month for both these sites, especially Brownsville. It's really amazing. Brownsville has almost, their September precip's almost 6 inches per month, which is almost double their next highest month in October. So from a climate standpoint, I think the odds of Corpus and Brownsville improving, shorter term, say May into the summertime, are a little bit less than as Victoria's go further north, just strictly based on climatology, what we expect to occur. So here's the forecast portion. This is the global forecast system model that the NWS uses. This is the best forecast model the NWS has. And this is the 16-day forecast rainfall from the most latest run, which was midnight last night. It runs 4 times a day. And this goes out 16 days, so it goes out through May 7th. And you can see things are pretty dry. Looks like rainfall totals are about 1 inch or so for the Victoria area, maybe 3/4 inch to 1 inch. And as you work your way down south towards Corpus and Brownsville, amounts really taper off. Looks like less than 1/4 inch or maybe just about 1/4 inch. And both these totals are below normal, I'll add. So short term, next 2 weeks, things are not looking good. This is the Climate Prediction Center NWS forecast model or forecast rainfall for the 8 to 14 day period, which is week 2, and you can see pretty much near normal precip. So basically, we go from near zero rainfall in week 1, which looks like what's going to be the case, to near normal rainfall in week 2. So near zero rainfall week 1, near normal rainfall week 2 leaves us below normal overall for the next 2 weeks. So the end result, I'm reasonably confident end results for the next 2 weeks, we'll see below normal precip or below normal rainfall for that coastal area from Victoria down to Corpus, and also up the Rio Grande too, as far as say Laredo area. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel. This image here is from the European model, which over a long period of time, I think based on various different measures, it's probably the top model in the world, quite honestly. But anyway, you can see here's a 45-day precipitation anomaly from this European model, which goes out through June 5th. And you can see the entire state of Texas pretty much is forecast to be above normal for rainfall. So despite the near zero rainfall week 1, near normal week 2, which leaves us pretty much below normal through the first week of May, it's looking like, say from May 5th through June 5th, that 4-week period, things are looking up for above normal rainfall across the entire drought-stricken area, say from Houston here to Del Rio southward. And this is the latest CPC forecast for the month of May. And this looks, very similar to what we just saw. Basically, for the month of May, the Climate Prediction Center is forecasting about a 45% chance. These are in terciles. There's about a 45% chance of above normal rainfall in this area here. 33% chance of near normal, that's a given. And there's about a 22% chance of below normal. So basically, the odds are tilted sort of 2 to 1 in favor of being wetter than normal as opposed to being drier than normal for the month of May for the pretty much the entire drought-stricken area. And so that's good news. And like I said, I think the bulk of that should probably fall the last 3 weeks of May because, as I mentioned, week 1 looks very dry, week 2 perhaps near normal. And so in summary, before I kick it over to John, the worst spots in South Texas are seeing about a 1 in 10 year drought right now, but of course that's being exacerbated by these high temperatures. Once again, difficult to quantify that, but we know that the objective measures, objective measurements, just looking at rainfall anomalies, are probably worse than what we're seeing objectively on account of these high temperatures. I don't see any improvement for the next 2 weeks. In fact, if anything, things will probably get worse. And weeks 3 through 5 or 3 through 6 through the end of May, even into perhaps the first week of June, looks like improvement will be had. And that's going to be really, really key for the Victoria area, with May being their wettest month. If Victoria does not see improvement, or the northern, say the middle coast, upper coast part of the drought area does not see improvement in May, that's going to be really, really bad news, due to the fact that that's their wettest month of the year. Then, of course, in the summertime, we have got tropical systems, and pretty much all bets are off, because who knows how that's going to track. Anyway, my last bullet there. So I'm going to say with moderate to high confidence, we will see improvement in Victoria through the end of, by the end of May. With less confidence, I will say that we'll see some improvement at Corpus and Brownsville also, based on both the CPC forecast and what the European model is showing for that week 3 through 6 time period, or 3 through 5 time period. And with that, I do want to point out real quick, we do have National Weather Service. We've got 4 forecast offices that cover this drought area. The southern portion of the Houston office, the southern portion of San Antonio office covers pretty much I-10 corridor, and just a couple, 3 counties south. There's their contact information right there. If you need any kind of specific information or data or forecast, whatever, short term, longer term, you're welcome to contact them. Every one of those offices has a climate service focal point who is in tune and trained to answer your questions in that regard. But more importantly, the Brownsville and the Corpus office down there in deep South Texas, there's their contact information, and you're welcome to contact them with any kind of specific questions or needs you may have. And with that, Joel, you can take it back. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Victor. That was very informative, and your expertise is acknowledged. So thank you for all of that. We've had 2 questions come in. Those of you who've asked questions, I'm going to hold your questions until after Dr. Nielsen-Gammon gives his presentation, just in case he answers some of your questions in his presentation. So I'm going to hold off all of those questions to the end. I'm going to now pass the baton over to John. I hope this works. And John, are you?
I'm on the line. I don't have any slides to show, but
okay.
I am happy to give my perspective on things. And
Sure.
What I'm going to focus on, since Victor gave a good summary of how we got to this situation, is my take on what's in store in the future. So this next week, it looks extremely dry for South Texas, unfortunately. There may be a little bit of light rain here and there, but chances of getting a significant rain producer seem very remote at this point. The only good news on that front is that we'll probably manage to avoid those hot, dry, windy days, except possibly this Friday. It looks like could be the hottest and driest of the bunch. So what moisture we still have in the soil, maybe we'll hold on to somewhat. Then we transition in for a few days into a somewhat different weather pattern, where there'll be chance of some isolated heavy thunderstorms, heavy rainfall events from around April 30th through the weekend of next weekend. Probably not as optimistic as what we had like 1 or 2 weeks ago. We had some really substantial rainfall amounts in few places, but there could indeed be some isolated relief. But at this point, it doesn't look like anything widespread. And then it looks like we do the transition to a potentially much wetter pattern around the end of next weekend, say May 2nd to 4th. We'll start tapping into a substantial flow of tropical moisture again. There'll be a chance of weather disturbances coming in from the Gulf of Mexico and across the Southwest. And so we will then have the opportunity of getting one or more of those widespread rain events that can often happen in May, as you saw in the climatology. So my progression over the next 3 weeks is basically from extremely pessimistic the first week to moderately pessimistic the second week, and then around the end of the second week, beginning of the third week, hopeful. Certainly no guarantees at this point, and you'll be able to watch the weather forecast toward the end of next week to see what's actually shaping up. But at least the potential will be there compared to very low potential over the short term. And I agree with Victor that once you start getting beyond a few weeks this time of year, there's very little track record of any predictability for precipitation in this part of the United States. So as we get into the summer, it's mostly crossing one's fingers. There's not a lot of guidance we can give beyond the first few weeks. So those are my comments on the forecast. I'll turn it back over to Joel.
Thank you, John. So just in summary, if you need some water, just wait a little bit, right? The next few weeks doesn't look that great, but beyond that, we're fingers crossed that things will improve.
That's the optimistic view. The pessimistic view is if you need water, you're going to have to wait a bit.
Okay. So we've had 2 questions come in, and I think either Victor or John can, if you want to try to answer them, just holler. The first one, it reads, after 9/11, it was reported that grounding of air traffic and therefore contrails caused an increase in temperature. What will the present grounding of air traffic due to COVID-19 due to temperature? I don't know much about the impacts of the airplanes on temperature. So John or Victor, does that land within your area of expertise at all?
Yeah, I can address it. The initial results, initial research after 9/11 said temperatures seem to be affected by 1 or 2 degrees. But then when we looked at it more closely, it turns out that the computer forecasts were forecasting weather that was 1 or 2 degrees different because of the weather pattern, and the effect of the contrails wasn't all that significant. So it's certainly not going to have something that you notice in terms of day-to-day weather. And the overall impact, even being optimistic about it, is going to be less than 1 degree. So it'll be interesting to look at, but it's not going to have much practical consequence.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. For the next one, could early season tropical cyclone activity enhance coastal plains rainfall by late May, similar to the 45-day ECMWF forecast?
I'll go ahead and take
I'll briefly answer it and then let Victor go in more detail. The western Gulf of Mexico is also dry for the first couple of weeks, but then things start happening down there, and the Gulf in general has been running above normal for its temperatures. So we will have, in my opinion, good prospects for something developing. Even good prospects are probably less than a 50% chance, but the question is absolutely correct. Those can turn around an entire season. I remember in 2002, we were starting off with a very dry summer, and then we had basically rain for 2 weeks in South Texas, and ended up being a very wet summer.
Yeah, Joel, I would concur with John. Actually, the sea surface temperatures right now in the Gulf of Mexico as a whole, I believe, are actually at record high levels. So about 2 degrees Celsius above normal, which is quite a bit. If you think about a large body of water, it's about 4 degrees Fahrenheit. So that would indeed be conducive to the tropical system spinning up, obviously having above normal sea surface temperatures. So that would be conducive to something spinning up. And also the fact that they're in the early in the season, in early June, mid-June, except month of June in general, the Gulf of Mexico is one of the more likely areas to see tropical storms develop or tropical cyclones develop. So I would say the chance of something above chance of a tropical cyclone developing in the Gulf of Mexico in general are definitely above average for June. But now whether that system, if it should develop, would affect the Eastern Gulf or the Central Gulf, the Western Gulf, who really knows? And I think that would probably not be until June, a little bit early. The official start of the tropical season is June 1st. And I think we've had an early storm each of the last 3 or 4 years or so, but I wouldn't count on that. But I think for June as a whole, yes, things would. I would, like John, I would be cautiously optimistic that perhaps one would develop and hopefully just be a good rain producer and without the extreme winds and or the extreme rainfall.
And I'll just briefly mention that the reason we have to generally wait until June is because we have to wait for the jet stream to move far enough north that it becomes possible for a disturbance to sort of camp out in the Gulf of Mexico and spin up rather than just being carried off to the east like it would be during the wintertime and early spring.
Great. Thanks to both of you. I've had another question come through, and it's about the warm sea surface temperatures in the Gulf. So the SST and oceanic heat content can also positively affect rainfall totals for synoptically forced non-tropical waves in May and June. That came from Barry. I think that was more of a comment than a question, and I think that's right, but I'll let the experts comment on that. What about other non-tropically forced waves? Does the sea surface temperatures have a positive impact on rainfall from those waves?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. The potential for thunderstorm activity in South Texas really depends on 3 factors. One of them is how cold the air is aloft to allow for instability, and then second one is how much heat and moisture is present at low levels. And the Gulf of Mexico temperatures are instrumental in determining how hot and moist the air is that's coming in. So it's one of those ingredients that we do need for getting heavy rain. And I also want to mention the third ingredient is oftentimes we get dry air aloft, which sort of puts a cap on the convection. It's why it's harder to get substantial rainfall in South Texas than in North Texas during April-May timeframe. And the forecasts for the next couple of weeks actually have decent amounts of rain in northern Mexico. And that doesn't, of course, supply water to South Texas directly, but it may reduce that cap. It may reduce the supply of dry air aloft if they get some rain ahead of time and allow thunderstorms have an easier time developing. So that's another optimistic note.
Yeah, Joel, if you want to switch the screen back over to me, I've got the latest Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperature analysis map called up here. And anyway, bottom line is it's everywhere west of 90 degrees west longitude, the Gulf is running basically 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above normal. If you can see my map, I think you can see my screen there.
Yeah, we can see the cursor on the screen.
Yeah, super. Okay, so this dark hash line here is 1 degree Celsius above normal. The dotted line here, or the dashed line, is 1.5, and the areas in here are 2 degrees Celsius above normal. So that's about 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, which is quite a bit. And so the entire Gulf as a whole is also above normal. So I agree with John that in general, this would be a positive going forward for enhanced tropical cyclone activity and hence increased probability, maybe some heavier rainfall than normal across the coastal parts of Texas, at least in the June, maybe in the July time period.
Great, thanks. Those are the only questions that people had typed in. So I might open up, if anybody feels brave enough to unmute yourself and ask a question. I might have to unmute you. Maybe if you raised your little hand, there's a little hand icon, and ask a question. And I'll unmute you. And if nobody puts their hand up, then we might wrap up now. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to ask a question if there's any more.
So Joel, I think while people are doing that, perhaps, I guess if I could summarize, maybe John can summarize, I think, we worked on our presentations totally independently. So what John, the information John gave, what I gave, or each arrived at differently with no collaboration or coordination. So I think we both agree week one, things look below normal rainfall wise, if not near zero. Week two, some improvement, some ramp up, perhaps getting back to near normal. Then perhaps, like John pointed out, weeks, starting the second 2 weekends from now, maybe what is it, May 5th or so, I believe. Weekend May 3rd, May 4th, May 5th. Hopefully around that point in time, we'll see a change or a shift in the pattern, and things will hopefully become at or above normal for rainfall. Does that sound correct, John?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. And I'll also mention that our ability to look into the future depends on the weather pattern. And actually, under this circumstance, it seems that we can actually be fairly confident about the dryness for the next week and a half. Other times we might only be able to say what might happen over 5 or 6 days, but I think at this point we can actually see a little bit farther than normal. I wish we could see rain, but at this point it looks dry.
Great, thanks. There's a question from Elizabeth Turner. She's put her hand up, and I'm not sure how to unmute Elizabeth. I don't know how to make this happen.
You could highlight her name, Joel, on the attendees list, highlight her name, and then unmute her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Elizabeth, we can hear you.
Okay, this question is not a joke, and you may think of something, in the days coming, but has the coronavirus complicated, changed, altered anything regarding the gathering of data, interpretation of data, precipitation? Is coronavirus a totally different subject to be dropped? I'm just curious.
Yeah, the main sources of weather information are mostly unaffected by the pandemic. The one exception would be we get a lot of good upper air information from aircraft travel. That's been cut down a bit, but it hasn't been eliminated, so we're still getting some data from there. So there may be a slight drop off in forecast accuracy because of a drop off in upper air information, but I personally do not expect it to be significant. Conversely, with more people staying at home, hopefully we'll get more people participating in the COCORA's rain observing network and producing regular rain observations. So I can be optimistic on that front.
Yeah, John, this is Victor. Actually, I think it's an excellent question, and I would agree with you, John. I think as far as gathering data goes, observe rainfall data, I think we're okay there. We've got the radar still working. Rainfall amounts not only based on radar data, but also satellites. So I think we're good there as far as measuring rainfall and measuring data goes. But like John pointed out, a lot less airplanes flying. I think it's probably about 80% curtailment or 75% curtailment. And there is a lot of the airlines that fly, or a lot of the aircraft that fly, do have weather instruments on board, which gather data, winds aloft information, temperature, dew point, etc. And so that's been cut back. And there's been some speculation or some thought that maybe, hey, with less data, the models going forward will be less good or less effective. And I guess the time will tell on that. But I agree with John. If there's any impact, it should be minimal.
Great. Thanks to both of you. I don't see any other questions that have come in, so we might wrap it up there. Thank you to all of you who have attended, and also to our two panelists, Dr. John Nielsen-Gammon and Victor Murphy. We are going to hold a similar webinar to this one, also looking at weather patterns and drought patterns and outlook in 2 weeks, again on Wednesday. So what's the date for that? The 2nd, where's my calendar? The next one is, sorry, the 6th of May. And so we hope you can all come back and participate then. So again, thanks to Victor and John, and we look forward to seeing you all again at the next webinar.